So we finished. We read through 35 last week. There's just a couple more comments I want to make on because I didn't cover them during the Bible study. But the whole concept of you know how they find or Jacob tells them, put your foreign gods. We talked a lot about him hiding them, right? He hides them under the terebinth tree because they're going to go over and worship God. They're going to go to Bethel and worship God, so you can't have any of your idols with you. And then he says, purify yourselves and change your garments. We talked a little bit about that last week, but I just want to reemphasize that this whole business of us making ourselves clean before we can come into God's presence. There's some truth to that God doesn't allow anything unholy in his presence, right? But we can't make ourselves clean. That's the and when we try to make ourselves clean is when we get dirtier and dirtier. It's like when you're trying to wash yourself clean in God's eyes, in God's sight. When you're trying to wash yourself clean in your own righteousness, it's like using
dirty water.
It's like using a piece of charcoal as a bowl of soap or a bar of soap. The more you do that, the more you scrub, the worse off you are, the dirtier you are, because you get filled with pride and you get filled with self-righteousness and you think you're the one cleaning yourself. So this just shows, the whole point I want to bring this up is, this just shows that Jacob's faith, his understanding, is never all the way there. Not to say that he doesn't believe and he's not saved and all that. Of course he is. But the point being, even Jacob, the great patriarch Jacob, the one who gave birth to the 12, or whose sons become the 12 tribes of Israel, even he's a poor, miserable sinner who needs the grace of God. Because he's ordered. And then, and when we hear things like this, when we hear, he's got idols in the household and he's telling all his household to put their idols away, their household gods, we're going to hide them all under the tree, and we think, how dare they have household gods? How many do you have? That was the catechetical instruction from the epitome today, and the epitome of the Formula of Concord. When you approach the law of God just on the basis of Moses's 10 words, 10 commandments, as if they are some outward, external word that you can keep as long as you don't commit outward, external sins, then the veil ever hangs over your face, and you can never see the cross of Christ because you don't need it. Right? If the 10 commandments are doable, why do you need Jesus? And so as it says in the epitome, Jesus came and preached the law in a whole new way. It's always been there. It's always what the law meant, but he preached it in a new way to their understanding, and he preached it in a way that said, the law is not about merely external works, but the law is about what's in your heart, what's in your mind. It's not only physical, it is spiritual. So that, you shall not murder. You say, well, I haven't murdered anyone, but you have murdered many people in your hearts. In fact, anger makes you guilty of breaking the 5th commandment. And ultimately, the first commandment, it's first for a reason, because all other commandments flow from that. If you keep the first commandment, you'll keep all the rest. If you keep the first commandment, if you don't have any other gods but the true God, right? And you put all your trust in him and you worship him only, all the rest of the commandments will just fall right in place. The problem is you can't even get past the first. And this is the mistake in Jesus' day. You know, this is what the religion became, a religion of self-righteousness, a religion solely of works. So that you have one of my favorite parables, you all know this because I've talked about it millions of times in Bible studies and preached on it, but the parable of the Good Samaritan, when the expert in the law, the lawyer comes up, he says, what shall I do? You're already wrong. What shall I do to inherit eternal life? He's wrong because you can't do anything to inherit something, right? But he's thinking in this works righteous way that the law is doable. I have this checklist, and if I just check off all these things, then I'll earn my way. I'll earn eternal life. And so Jesus says, what's in the law? How do you read it? What do you think? And the lawyer answers perfectly. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, you shall love your neighbor. Perfect. Jesus said, yes, that's it. Do that, and you shall live. And do you remember what the lawyer's response to that is?
Who's my neighbor?
Who's my neighbor, right? What does that tell you about the lawyer?
He thinks he can do it.
Right. Well, what is he assuming? What is he assuming? He's assuming that he's done the first table of the law.
So all these things I have done.
Right. All these. Right. I've kept. I got the first commandment down. Second commandment down. Third commandment down. This fourth through 10th. I just need I need to find what the exact parameters are here so that I can check these off too, because there are some people that I just really struggle loving. So what does Jesus do? He tells the parable, the Good Samaritan. He makes the guy that this expert in the law hates the hero. But the point being, he thinks he's got the first, he thinks he's got the whole love God with all your heart down, business down to a T. That's done. It's this other stuff. Crazy. Anyway, so that my whole point in bringing all that up is that's we see that in Jacob. It's not hidden from us. It's just right out there in the open. Jacob is quite a character. We said this is the reason I wanted to bring this up, because we said last week he should have destroyed those gods instead of hiding them under the terebinth tree, right? And then we get all we get up on our high horses and make these declarations. But how many gods do you still have that you haven't destroyed? And anything that we put before our love and trust and obedience to God is a god. And there are many sub deities in the massive deity Mammon that we are often guilty of worshiping. Anyway, so all right, that's all I want to say about that. So chapter 36, moving on. Comments, questions about any of that? All right, chapter 36. I said we're not going to read through this. Just a couple of things to highlight about this. Esau, right at the very first verse of 36, these are the generations of Esau, that is Edom. So whenever you see Edomites in the rest of the Bible, that's Esau's descendants. That's the tribe of Esau. They will eventually, they start off in relative peace with Israel, right? And you can understand why, because Esau and Jacob have reconciled. At the end of chapter 35, they go and they bury their father together, and they go their own ways, and they each become their own nations. But there's not this animosity between them. There's this partnership. But over time, that fades away, and Edom becomes an enemy of Israel. It starts around the time of Moses, maybe a little bit before that, but where this animosity begins to build up, and then eventually, both Saul and David the first and second kings of Israel. That was a Jeopardy question recently. Who was the second king of Israel?
Yeah. Somebody got the Jeopardy.
And somebody said, and the guy said Solomon. He's like, I'm like, no, David.
And
Anyway.
then they had a Bible art category yesterday.
I didn't see yesterday's.
Yeah. Somebody knew Hagar.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's impressive. But eventually, Saul and David both go to war with them, and it's just things are never really the same between them. Also, what you want to note when you read through this genealogy is that Esau gets very involved in paganism, or his descendants. I mean, he that's what happens. He marries a Canaanite. Remember, going back, Jacob and Rachel weren't happy about that. The women he was marrying, and well, it turns out over time that paganism finds its way in and ends up controlling things, so that you forget about the religion you were brought up in. So there's all kinds of things you could say about that. Here's an interesting note about Esau's descendants. Herod the Great comes from him. Y'all know who Herod the Great is, right? He's one of Esau's descendants. So that's kind of interesting. And and Jesus is a descendant of Jacob's line, and Herod the Great and Jesus weren't best of friends. Anyway, so well, actually, Herod the Great wanted to destroy Jesus. Before he even came. The last thing I want to say about this is, so you have this animosity between Edom, the Edomites, and the Israelites all through history, and then you get they come together. They're enemies, but they come together in 70 A.D. Why? What happens in 70 A.D.? Rome invades under Titus. The armies of Rome come in, and they end up destroying Jerusalem. But the Edomites join with their brothers, the Israelites, and try to fight them off, but they both lose. So anyway, and that's all that's all I got to say about that. In the words of the great theologian Forrest Gump. So chapter 37, Joseph. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Joseph's story begins. Joseph's story is by far the lengthiest story in Genesis. Covers the rest of the book. So, 14 chapters. So you go from Noah to Moses to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Now you get to Joseph. And y'all know the story because you've heard it a million times, but we're going to read through it. So Jacob lived in the land of his, and this is, sometime later, as we're going to learn here in a second. Joseph is 17 years old, so he's the youngest. So all his brothers are, 20s and 30s by now. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. And then whenever you see that phrase, you think, okay, oh boy, here comes a bunch of names and stuff. But no, you get that later, but you go right into the story of Joseph. These are the generations of Jacob. Let me tell you about Joseph. As the preeminent, he's the one. We need to follow him. So these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. What? Whose son was Joseph? Rachel. What did we learn in chapter 35? She died. We can also infer from this that Leah has also died. We're not told that. But the fact that Bilhah and Zilpah here are mentioned, who are the lesser wives, the servants that became lesser second wives to Jacob. Now they're promoted to full wifehood, full wifeliness, as they're listed as the only mothers here, Anyway, it doesn't say his father's. It doesn't say Rachel and Leah's servants or maidservants. It says his father's wives. So they're promoted. They're the only ones around. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel, this is great stuff. 3. That just comes right out and tells you what a main problem here is. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. That's a pretty deep hatred where you can't even get along. You can't even pretend to get along. They can't even speak peacefully to him. So, there's great animosity. They want nothing to do with Joseph. So we've seen this many times where this family just reeks of it. It's just like a family trait. I've said this before, but from Abraham right on down, they all have favorites and they all love certain children more than others, and that's always a recipe for disaster. Even if that's true, it should never really be true. You should love all your children equally. That doesn't mean that you love them all the same, or you treat them all the same, right? Because they're unique, they're different, unique individuals. And then sometimes that can be mistaken as favoritism because you don't treat them all the same, right? But this isn't that. This isn't that he treated Joseph a little differently than he. No, this is he outright loves Joseph more. And Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin are the apples of his eyes, because they were born to his true love, Rachel. Those other sons are just Leah's sons. Poor Leah, that's what I started to say. The fact that we never get to hear what happens to her when she dies is just par for the course for her, right? She's just kind of an afterthought. She's never treated well. And so it's the same here with the sons of Leah. Yeah, they're my sons. Joseph's my son. And Benjamin. Here's the other thing. It says here that Joseph was his favorite because he was born in his old age. Now we can understand a little bit of that. When you think about it, this is still true to I think those couples that have children when they're young and then they end up having one later. Sometimes an accident, but whatever the case. And then the older kids, I'm talking they're 15, 16, 20 years old by the time the young one comes. The older kids see how the parents now treat that kid. And they're like, what the heck? That kid doesn't have a bedtime. He eats in the living room. They bought him a new car when he was 16. None of us got right. There's something to say about as you get older, and you might change the way you do things. Here's the other thing: when you're younger and when you start a family at a young age, you're working all the time. You know, yeah, you're supporting your kids. You go to as many of their sporting events as you can, and you know you're parenting the best you. But you also have a lot of other stuff on your mind. Well, when you get older, maybe you're not. You're already settled. Whatever you're doing, you know, you have more time. So that more time. Or you could also think of it this way. You just love your grandkids more than your kids. I don't know what to tell you. I tell my kids that all the time. I love you with all my heart, but my grandkids, there's a like a all my heart plus a little bit.
Right.
There's a little bit more. So when you, in Joseph's case, I mean, you can see it that way too, that it's almost like this is one of his grandkids. Anyway, so whatever the case, and this is all, it's just bare humanity in our face. The scriptures, if you think you're reading a book of a bunch of holy people that lived just holy, perfect lives, and that's why God chose them and all this stuff, you're reading the wrong book. It's a book about sinners who rely on the grace of God through Christ. So anyway, and he made him a robe of many colors. The Technicolor Dream Coat or whatever. You know.
Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dream Coat.
But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So that's the setup for what's about to follow. The other thing you got to realize, so Joseph is 17 years old. What does that mean about Joseph? What are all 17-year-olds? Snotty know-it-alls. Have you ever met a 17-year-old that didn't know everything?
And he knows he's his father's favorite. So.
And exactly, add to that, I'm daddy's favorite.
Right.
And you get a picture of Joseph, as a teenager at least, as an arrogant, cocky, know-it-all jerk. That's the picture that's painted. He brings a bad report to his dad. Hey, Daddy, they weren't pasturing the flocks, right? Whatever the report was. We're not told what the report was. Huh?
Guess what those two were?
Yeah. He's a snitch. He's out with his brothers, and he's 17 years old. And he goes out and he brings his father a bad report about his brothers. So they hated him all the more. And what does his daddy do? He makes him a coat. A special coat. A coat that stands out.
Yeah, and getting many colors at that time.
Right. Oh, it's an expensive coat. Right. Exactly. Good point. It's not, this isn't a jean jacket or something. I mean, this is something that would be on the runway. You know, displayed on the runway. I mean, but his brothers are like, wait a minute here. Snitches get stitches. They don't get rewarded. Dad rewarding him? So, I mean, they just hated him all the more. And then you get this. This shows the arrogance of Joseph, of teenage Joseph. I don't want to say Joseph because he grows out of this. I mean, he grows into a man of faith. But now, verse 5, now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Well, why? Well, because he said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. How would that not tick his brothers off? Wouldn't it tick you off? Here's little puny teenage Joseph.
They haven't beat the crap out of him.
Daddy's little favorite. You think we're gonna bow down to you? Never. Are you? And that's the response. Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. You get the picture that Joseph was. Remember, these stories just are summaries and highlights of what's going on. You have to piece together the rest of what you know about humanity to get an accurate picture of what's going on here. But you could just picture Joseph running off at the mouth all the time about his status, about him being the favorite, blah, blah, blah. And, this probably isn't the first time he came back and tattletaled on his brothers. Anybody have experience? That might be too personal, but you've seen this in the world, though. You've seen this in the world in families, big families, where certain individuals are treated way different than the rest of everybody's seen that? Or I have, not in my immediate family, but
Well, clearly he's not aware of maybe he knows the level of hatred that his brothers have for him, but he doesn't realize the extent that they're going to go to.
He's naive.
Yeah, he's very naive.
And yeah, that's another point.
Yeah.
And so is Jacob.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't get it. They don't get. Maybe this is because the brothers keep it between themselves. They know better than to say it to dad. They know better than to correct Joseph or get in his face in front of dad. So I mean, this is something that's building up among them that they're keeping from Jacob and Joseph. But yeah, it's so verse 9. Then he dreamed another dream. And told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream.
And they went, oh, great.
Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." And listen, look at so the sun and the moon. Now he adds the sun and he adds 2 more. So there's these 11 sheaves. Now there's the sun and the moon. And look at Jacob interprets this correctly, or his interpretation are, now you're including me and your mother? You're including, we're going to worship, it's bad enough, the sons, your brothers, you say this to your brothers, now you're saying it to me? When he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So it's interesting that Jacob's not a fan of these. Let's say it this way. Jacob was probably, I think the reason it's put in here like this, he dreamed this dream, he told his brothers, then he dreamed this dream, and it was about dad too. I think Jacob was just fine with the first dream. Of course you're gonna be above them because you're my favorite, you're my son, you're my true son. You're the son of Rachel. But then when it's Jacob that's going to bow, I don't know about that. However, Jacob keeps it in mind. Why? Why is that little detail given to us? Why do you think? What does it mean to keep it in mind? He's like, it doesn't rule it out.
Yeah.
This very possibly could happen. Why does Jacob think that? I think there's a number of reasons, but you can go back to just the nature of his own birth, where he came out second. Esau was preeminent, and yet, who gets the birthright? Who gets the blessing? Jacob. So the older serves the younger, and so, and that's how it's gone a few times. Right? With Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael is Abraham's firstborn son. Isaac gets the blessing. So Jacob is beginning to see a pattern here. So when Joseph tells this dream, he's like, I don't like it. And you should probably not say this out loud all the time to your brothers because they don't like it either. But maybe there's some truth to this. God does do this stuff where the younger becomes superior to the older. Anyway, verse 12. So that's the setup. Joseph is this arrogant, prideful, cocky teenage boy who's daddy's favorite, got this great, unique coat, and tells these dreams. And they hated him already. Now they hate him even more vehemently. I mean, it's just like, where now hatred becomes so much a part of them that they're waiting for the opportunity that they can act on it. But act on it in a way that they're not going to get caught. They're plotting. Right? And so in that way, and as we read through this, you guys know the story, but just keep in mind that in that way, you can really see the story of Christ, of Jesus, playing itself out already here, right? Where Joseph is the type of Jesus, not in his arrogance and pride and all that, but you know that Jesus, you know that little detail in the gospel that's often in there. He spoke as one who had authority, right? Now, that's true. He did because he's got authority, because he's God in the flesh. But that's also something that can rub people the wrong way. Right? And that's exactly what happens with the religious leaders, because here's this young, self-made rabbi who's speaking with this authority, and we are the authority. We are the one. We'll tell you what the Bible says. We'll tell you what our Jewish theology is. And so you see that animosity between the Jewish religious leaders, who are, by the way, the brothers of Jesus. They're all part of the same family, right? They're all Jews. They're all part of the same descendancy. They hate Jesus, and that hatred just wells up more and more until what happens that we'll celebrate next Friday happens. They hang him on a cross and kill him. So just keep that, and there's other things where you can point out as we go through this. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, Here I am. So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So maybe Joseph is Jacob's little spy. So, maybe we should let Joseph a little bit off the hook.
They're already snitched on the wives.
Maybe his snitching is at his father's bidding. And I just got to say, you see this as a type of Christ too, where Jacob is a type of the father who sends the son to preach. And they kill this, right? So the parable of the vineyard, right? The vineyard owner, where this happens on Holy Tuesday. It's one of the parables Jesus speaks, where the tenants lease the land, and it goes through this period where they end up killing the servants, blah, 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 and taking the stuff for themselves, the tenants. And then the vineyard owner says finally, "Well, I'll send my son, surely they'll respect him." And they end up killing, and Jesus says, "And you kill the son." And they killed the son. And the Pharisees and the scribes, and they all know that he's saying that directly at them. Right? I love that line. They perceived that he was speaking about them. In other words, they weren't struggling with the interpretation of that particular parable that day. They knew exactly what Jesus was saying. And so this is a foreshadowing of that too, where the father thinks his son is safe and they'll end up killing him, although Joseph doesn't die here, but you know what I mean. It's just going, like what Andrea said, it's just great naivete. They're just naive. They don't get it. The anger of the brothers, of the other sons of Jacob, they don't understand how powerful it is, how powerful it has become, the hatred. Otherwise, you wouldn't do this. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man, this is verse 15, it's just great stuff. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they? Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan.
Oops.
What? I mean, what do you not see it's an amazing little thing that's just inserted in there, isn't it? Just out of nowhere, Joseph arrives at Shechem in this mysterious man. We're not told who he is, where he comes from. Just this man. Joseph says, "I'm looking for my brothers. They're supposed to be here." And he says, "No, they're over in Dothan."
You don't.
Because I know exactly who your brothers are.
I know who you
Because
are.
I'm a man that knows everything.
I know who you are, and I know who your brothers are.
Well, that's the point. If you just read through this and you don't stop and think about it, it's probably, whatever the case, there's many explanations for this. This could be an angel directing things. It could be the pre-incarnate Christ, or it could be just a man that God has put there for that reason. Who knows? But there's no mistaking the fact that this is God directing things. You with me? This isn't happenstance. This isn't coincidence. You don't just run into a dude when you get to Shechem and your brother's supposed to be there pasturing the flocks, and this dude just happens to know who your brothers are and where they went. You could explain that. You could say, well, maybe he was pasturing. But the point being that God is in control of this. You with me? He sends Joseph to face his brothers and the peril that awaits him. So this man could be a type of the father who sends Joseph, who sends the son to face his brothers and the peril that they will bring. Anyway, so it's verse 18, they saw him from afar, and before he came, they saw him from afar because he's wearing that dang coat. It sticks out like a sore thumb.
Be like a neon sign.
Somebody even said that maybe that's how that man knew who Joseph was and his brothers was, because he was wearing that stupid coat. He's like, "Oh, you're Jacob's kid. You're the favorite." Yeah, we know. We've heard all about that story. That could be too. But anyway, they see him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Do you see? That's blatantly obvious. A type of the Jewish religious leaders plotting to kill Jesus. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him in." This is their brother. There's a baby brother. Let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that not only this is like premeditated on steroids, because they're coming up with, not only will we kill him, now we're going to come up with a cover story right away, so we won't get blamed for it. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him." And then we're told this, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. Why do you think? Because this is an unlikely candidate. Reuben. Reuben probably hates Joseph more than all of them. He's the firstborn, and Joseph is treated as the firstborn. You with me? Why do you think Reuben is stepping up here?
He may be many things, but he's not killer.
Okay, so he could have good, and he could have that quality that he might be many things, but he's not a killer. Okay, what else? What do we know about Reuben that we just learned a few chapters back? Actually, yeah. What little incident did Reuben have?
And sometimes when his wife's okay, his head's going to be.
Yeah. Reuben lay with Bilhah after Rachel died. Right? And remember we talked about that, how that's probably Reuben asserting his authority, checking his dad, because his dad has been, in their eyes, weak and ineffective. And so Jacob was never, you see this throughout the entire story of Jacob, he was never the warrior. He's never the fighter. He's more of I'm a lover, not a fighter kind of guy. Esau's the fighter, Esau's the warrior, Esau's the hunter, the outdoorsman, the rough, brawny man. Jacob is, the video game player. He likes to binge watch Netflix and think deep thoughts and read books and all this. So he's not, the point being, he's not a man of action. And his sons see that. And so Reuben, and Jacob's getting older. Reuben steps up and it's almost kind of a challenge to Jacob's authority. And Jacob was none too happy about it. And ends up passing over Reuben, passing over Simeon and Levi, and giving the blessing in the end to the fourth son, Judah. So maybe putting that together, that just happened not too long ago, and Jacob's never forgotten about it, because it's an evil thing to do. You don't sleep with your dad's wife. You with me? I mean, it doesn't matter if she wasn't his. It doesn't matter if she wasn't his beloved Rachel. Now she's always been Jacob's, always been his wife. But especially after Rachel dies, now she's, his wife. So you don't do that. Maybe this is a way, if Reuben can rescue Daddy's favorite, right? And bring it back and say, look at what your all these other sons were going to do, but here, look, I should get the blessing. Forget about what I did with Bilhah. Here I am. I rescued your son. Let me be your second favorite now. You with me? That's that's got to be part of the motivation. So, he wants to rescue him. Verse 23, so when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, that they hated with a vengeful passion. And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. What is that a picture of? Hell. A waterless pit. Right? This is the rich man and Lazarus stuff. What is the rich man begging Father Abraham to have Lazarus do? Dip his finger in some water so that he might have a drop. Because it's a waterless abyss. Anyway, so they want to, the point being, they want to send him to hell. Then they sat down and sat down to eat. They strip their brother down. They throw him in a waterless pit. You know what? I'm kind of famished. Let's have a bite. They're just,
Did they sit
That
on the,
happened.
did they sit on the edge of the pit with their legs kind of dangling?
maybe, maybe,
Crumb.
Looking down at him going.
maybe, don't you wish you had something to eat?
Talking with their mouths.
What about your dreams now?
Throwing apple cores down at him.
They get the best of them. They get the best of them, and they flaunt it. It kind of makes you think about Jesus hanging on the cross, and
Eating food and throwing.
all the Pharisees and the scribes and the many other the priests, all, if you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. I thought you said you could do anything. I thought you said, right? I thought you said God was your Father. Why is He letting you die? I mean, just the nonstop mocking and deriding. And this is kind of that. We'll just sit here and eat.
Yeah, and like.
As if nothing happened, as if there's
Right.
no empathy for,
Right, clearly they're not feeling guilty, because usually if
No
you're doing
guilt.
something wrong, you don't feel good, your
Yeah.
stomach's upset.
Yeah.
No, they're able to sit down and eat.
they've thought about this moment for a long time. They've grappled with whatever guilt that they might feel, and they've justified it so thoroughly in their minds that there's no guilt, no shame. He deserves it.
At least we didn't kill him.
Right.
But he might die down there in that pit.
They sat down to eat, and as they're eating, they look up and they see a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, and on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood?" So they're still thinking about killing him at this point, right? They just throw him in a pit, strip him down and throw him in a pit while they have their lunch. And then they might go through with their plan to kill him. And what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. In other words, he is, after all, I mean, he's the biggest jerk around. We hate him. I understand we hate him, but he at the end of the day, he is our brother. This is the dude through whom the Messiah is going to come. Selling his brother out. And what does this tell you about Judah, too? I mean, what else could be motivating him here? I mean, if you sell your brother, I mean, that's as much as killing him. It might not be, let's kill him, but not kill him. Let's let other people, let's put him in a position where other people have blood on their hands, not us. That's how he's rational. But also, you know what, you guys, let's make a buck out of this. If we're gonna get rid of our brother, let's at least profit from it. Right? I mean,
It could potentially be worse than just killing him.
It is
Being
worse.
Sold into slavery, that's terrible. I'd rather die.
whenever I think about that, I think of, what was the name of that movie? A General's Daughter. Ever see that with John Travolta plays a investigator? There's a lot of big stars in that movie. But anyway, James Woods is in it, and he's accused of killing the general's daughter, and he didn't do it. We learn that it's Tim, whatever his name is at the end. But anyway, John Travolta is the lead investigator, and he asked James Woods when they got him locked up in jail, James Woods says that it's worse than murder, and John Travolta says, what could possibly be worse than murder? And James Wood he says, when you figure that answer out, then you'll know who did this. What's the answer? Betrayal. Being betrayed by someone who loves you. or being betrayed by someone who's supposed to love you is worse than murder. Because when you're murdered, that's it. You don't have to think about it anymore. But when you're betrayed, and you have to live with that, that's worse than murder. Anyway, so let's make a buck. If we're gonna, I can't believe none of you thought of this. That's Judah, folks. That's your holy son of the promise right there. Let's not kill him. What profit would that be to us? Let's sell him to others so that they can kill him and make a buck out of it. Isn't it interesting that his name's Judah, which is the same exact name as Judas? It's the same name. The guy with the same name comes up with a plan to betray his brother for money. Can you see? I mean, the whole point is God is telling this through the story of Joseph. God is telling us the story, as He's always doing. The Holy Spirit is a master at this because He's God. Woven into the seams of all these stories is the one story that matters, the story of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And so you have Judah, who's Judas, betrays his brother for some silver even. Isn't that what it says? 20 shekels of silver. Well, Judah got ripped off. 20 shekels of silver. Judas at least got 30 pieces of silver. Isn't that nice? Inflation, exactly.
I take it pieces and shekels were interchangeable.
Huh?
I take it the value of pieces and shekels.
I knew you were going to ask that, Luplo, and I just don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I'm sure you can find it.
He knew you didn't know the answer, so that's why I asked you.
Right. I don't know if when they say 30 pieces of silver in the Gospels, I'm not sure if that's exactly 30 shekels. I don't know. I didn't look that up. I should have. But you can. Anybody can look it up. I don't know. Does it say anything in the notes about that?
Shekel was about 2/5 ounce or 11 grams.
You'd have to go to, I'm not going to do that because I want to keep rocking and rolling here, but go to the Gospels and look in their notes when the 30 pieces of silver is mentioned, and maybe it'll say something. Anyway, so let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh, and his brothers listen to him. So Judah has some leadership qualities. And it seems as though he has become like the de facto leader since Reuben had been put down. Since Reuben made the big mistake with Bilhah, all that stuff. And they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit, so we're not told, but Reuben evidently wandered off and maybe he went to check on the sheep or whatever he was doing. He didn't know, he wasn't there when they sold their brother to the Ishmaelites or the Midianites, same thing. Remember that.
And the Ishmaelites, the same.
Remember that, yes.
The same group of people?
Yes. The Midianites or Ishmaelites are the same. I should have said this too, just looking at my notes. Just going back to the whole, where they sit down to eat, and then he's betrayed during that, this is kind of Last Supper-ish, isn't it? Jesus is betrayed at a meal. Anyway, There's all kind. The more you think about it, the more stuff you start to see coming to the mind as you think about the story of Christ here. The fact that they take him to Egypt, that's divine providence, right? God is directing this whole thing. He's going to end up in Egypt because ultimately he's going to save these. Think about this. Just put this. He's going to save these brothers who hate him and want him to die. That's God's working that plan out. He's working the salvation plan for these heinous brothers who sell their brother into slavery. Do you get me? This is crazy. This is our God. Even as Jesus is hanging on the cross and they're wagging their tongues at him and mocking him. You were going to build the temple in 3 days. All this kind of stuff. You can't save yourself. You saved others. Even as they're doing that, Jesus prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He's dying for them. It's to save them. This is the gospel. This is what our religion is all about. That we serve a God, we know a God, for he has revealed himself to us, who is worked out, who does everything he can to bring about the salvation of us poor, miserable pukes of sinners, right? This is the gospel, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That while we were enemies of God, spiritually dead, spiritually blind, ungodly, God sent his Son to live and die for us. And you all want to turn that religion into another religion of the law. Yeah, that's all great, but I still got to be good to get to heaven. Right? Isn't that? The gospel's some funky stuff. It doesn't make sense. God is letting all of this happen for the express purpose of saving these idiots. They don't deserve being saved. They don't deserve saving, right? If you sell your brother out, literally sell him to slave traders, you sell your brother into slavery, you don't deserve being saved. Can we all agree on that? What you deserve is punishment. We would never do such a thing. I, a poor, miserable sinner, confess unto you all my sins and iniquities. Right? That's us, always. We have sold our brother out many times. Maybe not literally into slavery in Egypt. Probably not. Let me know if you did that. I doubt it. But in many and various ways, we're guilty of the same sin. 29, when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? Worried about who? Me. These guys just aren't very, they're not robust in piety. Pietistic maybe, but not pious. They're not very pious. The boy's gone. And you get, that's why I think you can make that inference that he offers to, he comes up with this other plan where we're not going to kill him, so I can rescue him and be the hero. And now that plan's gone. Now he's like, you've foiled all my plans. I was going to get back into the mix of birthright and blessing stuff, man. I was going to be the preeminent son again. I was going to finally atone for my sin of laying with Bilhah and all that. He's worried about himself. Then, so what do? Got to come up with a cover-up. They took Joseph's robe. You can imagine them. Oh, they hated that robe. Oh, they hated it. What delight they had in tearing, ripping it, and then dipping it in blood. They took his robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the poor goat. The goat didn't do anything. And dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please, this is so sinful. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." It's like it's a gash through Jacob's heart. Not just that the realization is his son's died, because here's his robe all torn up and bloodied, but also, they're just, they're slapping him in the face. Is this the robe of your favorite? Is this that robe that you made for Joseph? As if Jacob would wonder if that's the robe or not, right? I mean,
and as if they could identify it themselves.
Exactly. They're
not interested in sparing their father grief.
Right, exactly. It's not. At the same time, they're interested in CYA.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, right.
Covering their butts. They're interested in that. But yeah, the whole. I mean, it's. I'm sure they weren't delighted when they brought this. They were acting like they were upset about Joseph, but inside they're like, "Take that, Dad." Anyway, and he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe." And you could just imagine the tears. I started to say that before. When Reuben tears his clothes, right? When he finds out. This is a false repentance. Repentance was identified in the Old Testament. That was a custom where they would tear their robes and they would don sackcloth, right, and ashes. Reuben's tearing his clothes is he's not upset about his sin. He's upset about the fact that his plan was foiled. It's a false repentance. And it's the same thing when Caiaphas, when Caiaphas asks the question, they're having all these other, what did he say here? What did he say? Caiaphas doesn't care about any of that. About him talking about the he healed on the Sabbath, or he said he was going to raise the temple in 3 days, or rebuild it in 3 days, or whatever. Caiaphas wants to know, from the source, from the mouth of Jesus, do you claim to be the Son of God? And when Jesus says, he pretty much says, yep, I am. Caiaphas tears his clothes as if he's just witnessed the most horrendous thing ever, and he doesn't care about any of that. It's a show. The whole trial was a show trial, right? He should get an Academy Award for it. Because he wants to convince all of his naive underlings that the only thing left to do is to kill Jesus. Anyway, but here it's different. Jacob is destroyed by this. It's his favorite. Any father should be destroyed by any child dying, but for Joseph, this is not just any. For Jacob, this is Joseph. He identified and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him." Joseph, there's no investigation. If they would have called the FBI in, they would have analyzed the blood on the robe and saw that it was a goat, and Joseph and Jacob would have been, wait a minute, a goat killed Jacob? No. What's going on here?
No DNA.
He just accepts. Well, I mean, this. I should say this too. I'm half kidding about this. I'm half serious because Jacob. This shows his naivete. He shows him being naive even more when he just accepts the story of these sons who obviously hate him. He doesn't understand how much they hate him, that they would come up with this story. He just believes them. And he should say, wait a minute, where did you find the robe? What's going on? How did this come to be? And I bet if he pushed them, I bet one of them would crack.
Right.
It's hard for 10 guys. It's hard for 10 guys to keep a story together for long. But when you don't push them, and maybe it's partly being naive, it's partly not understanding the depth of their hatred for Joseph and for him because of that, because of his favoritism of Joseph, but it's also partly the overwhelming trauma that he felt in that instant of seeing that coat soaked in blood and tattered and torn. Anyway, but that's the story that he just accepts the story. They don't even say a fierce animal. That's Jacob's conclusion based on this one piece of evidence and their story. We found this. Is it Joseph's?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That might be somebody else's multicolored robe. So he's torn up about this. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. And this is how deeply tragic this was for Jacob and how much he mourned and grieved this. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted and said, no, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. We're just getting trucking on this story of Joseph. A lot of good stuff already. And then we get this next chapter where it's just kind of like, let's put the brakes on that. We got to tell you this first. But I think we covered most of this stuff. Yeah. Any other comments, questions, concerns about that chapter? Oh, here's another. I don't think Jacob ever learns the truth. No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning. I think he mourned all the way to his last breath about what his sons have done, right? He does learn that Joseph is alive, so he doesn't mourn, his son's death. But I don't think the brothers ever come clean. They never confess, and Joseph doesn't tell them, right? Which is why after Jacob dies, the brothers say, we told Dad about what happened. He said, don't kill us. You with me? I mean, even after Joseph, I'm getting way ahead in the story, but you all know the story, but even after Joseph saves them and treats them as family and gives them everything, and even after all that, when they think the vengeance is still coming. Payback is just around the corner, and when Dad dies, Joseph surely is going to... And now he has the power because all those dreams he had came true. They came true. They bowed down to him. And even Dad had to come to Egypt and bow down to him, right? So that's just... They live with that the rest of their lives and never confess it. But Joseph forgives them anyway. before they confess it. They don't need to confess it to Joseph. They did it to Joseph. He forgives them anyway. It's beautiful stuff. It's just, the whole point is to get Joseph into Egypt, as I said, so that he can save these sinners. And if you don't see the overarching, if you don't see the story in that, your eyes are closed. I don't know what to tell you. That's the whole point of this story, by the way, is to serve as a trailer, a preview for the story. So the Old Testament, all these stories in the Old Testament are like, you know how you, in modern, maybe none of you go to the theater anymore. It's been a while for me too, but you go to the theater and the movie, the show time is like 2:10 p.m. And you go there and 2:10, the screen comes on, the lights go down, but then you got to sit through like 15 minutes of previews, advertisements and previews, which is annoying.
So you could get there in 15 minutes.
But that's the Old Testament. The Old Testament, don't miss all the previews.
Don't miss
I mean, it's different than that because they're previews of the actual. So I don't know if that's a bad. Forget I even said any of that.
Well,
Bad
are you
analogy.
saying once upon a time that God tells the same story over and over again?
Yeah, it's the same
Obsessed.
story
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah.
There's only one story.
There's only one story.
Only one story, told in many different ways.
And we still don't get it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because the one story is a fantasy. We have no way to comprehend it except through faith, except through God-given faith. Even then, we doubt it because we still have sinful flesh. If I could get people to realize just this one thing, if you are hearing what is said to be the gospel, and it makes complete sense to you, and it is reasonable to you, you have not heard the gospel. Period. If and that's, I don't want to get off on a tangent. That's what you hear over and over again in today's preaching in pop American Christianity. It's not the gospel. It's just how-to motivational messages. Now, there's a time and a place for that. I coached for many years. I'm all for rah, rah, let's go, motivational messages, all that stuff. It's great. If you want to get in shape, get a trainer who's going to beat you into shape. That's not the gospel. The gospel is, you can't do it. I've done it for you. The gospel is, you are not in shape. I don't care how many spiritual sit-ups you do. You're never going to get in shape. But Jesus is perfectly fit for you. Anyway, it's not, the gospel makes no sense to us. It's stupid. It really is. It's just, that's what distinguishes Christianity from all the other religions. It's the only religion that's stupid. Seriously, it is. It's the only religion that's unreasonable. The rest of them all make perfect sense. Do this stuff and you'll improve, and if you do it well enough, you'll get to heaven, or whatever the afterlife is for that religion. Christianity says, you can't do it, so I'm going to come do it for you in your place. And then, because you can't even believe that, I'm going to give you faith. I'm going to create faith and sustain that faith in you so that it's all His work. What percentage do you play in salvation? 0. It's stupid. It's crazy. It's foolishness, as St. Paul said. You're laughing because I said it's stupid. St. Paul says it's foolishness. It's the same thing. It's foolishness because it makes no sense. And you've heard me say this a million times, but that's if you approach the parables of Jesus, understanding that what you're about to hear is stupid, that makes no sense, and that's what his kingdom is like, then you'll begin to understand the gospel. You'll begin to understand what he's talking about. But if you approach it, if you try to make sense out of what can't be made sense of, you're not going to get the gospel. You're not going to understand his kingdom. All right. Let's go. We'll get through some of this at least. So you're expecting the story of Joseph to continue, but then you get this little interlude. We don't know how long this takes. We don't know we don't know how long after Joseph has been sold away. He's in Egypt, but sometime later, Judah. You get the story of Judah and Tamar. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira, his buddy Hira. Then there Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, because that's just the way you do things. It's almost... I don't think the Hebrew word here is the same as it was for what they did to Dinah. But it's still, I mean, Judah sees this woman, he wants her, treats her as possession, takes her, and goes into her. In other words, makes her his wife. And we're not even told what this woman's name is, ever. Just the daughter of Shua. Sad. He took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Kazib when she bore him. So, that's it. That's all you're told. He sees this woman, makes her his wife. She bears 3 sons. Now, much time has passed because now they're old. They're old enough to be married themselves, or at least and Onan are. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Good Lord. What? What? And you just have to speculate. You're not told any details. What was his wickedness? And why put him to death? What about Judah's wickedness? What about Reuben's wickedness? Doesn't make sense.
Still has plans for him.
Right, exactly, because God's working out a whole different thing than we can understand. It makes no sense to us. But why some, not others? And Luther says hell is reserved for people who ask that question. Anyway. I don't know. You're not God. Shut up. That's the answer. Who do you think you are, Job? You poor dude who I put you through hell in a handbasket, and you've stuck around, you've had the faith, and then finally when you ask just you have a little crack, I'm going to put you in your place. Who do you think you are? I'm God. You're not. Were you here when I formed the foundations of right? I mean, it's... for whatever reason, the Lord, and it's Yahweh, he was wicked in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh put him to death. However he did that, I don't know. It reminds you of Eli's wicked sons, right? They, at least we're told there, they offered unauthorized fire, whatever that meant. Maybe they're worshiping idols in the temple, or not in the temple, but in the tabernacle, in a holy place, by the altar of God. Who knows? I don't know. But they did something wicked, and the wickedness was they offered unauthorized fire. Here, it's just he did something wicked. He was wicked, or not. It's not even he did something wicked. He was just wicked. Then Judah said to Onan, now here's where it gets crazy to our modern ears. Go into your brother's wife. And I hate to, I mean, it's just the bluntness. This is PG-13 stuff, right? I mean, it's not. Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her and raise up offspring for your brother. This was a common tradition back in those ancient times where if your older brother died, or even younger, but I mean, if your brother died, you, the next oldest brother in the line, would take their wife as theirs and have sex with them and procreate, conceive children, and those children would be the dead brother's sons. They wouldn't be his. So that they would get the inheritance of the older brother. In other words, so what you're doing is you're producing offspring that are going to supersede you, that are going to be over you. It's called a levirate marriage. And you can imagine there were a lot of Onans back in the day who didn't like this arrangement. Why am I going to produce offspring that aren't going to be mine? They're going to get the inheritance and I'm not. Which is exactly what we're told in verse 9. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. I wonder why they didn't put seed there. But I mean, the word is semen, but I mean, just because the translators of most English, they like to dumb things, not like the whole rape thing. Seems like seed would be a cleaner word for them, but no, but it doesn't matter. You all know what he's doing, so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of Yahweh, and he put him to death also.
God's just not having it.
He's not having a good day. It's just... So, well, we only got 5 minutes left. We should have probably just quit early, but because there's a lot to talk about. Because that's a very controversial, this is a very controversial incident that a lot of people like to make a lot of hay over. What is the wicked thing that Onan does in the sight of the Lord here? Just spend the last few minutes here talking about this before we move on. What is it? By spilling his seed on the ground rather than...
If it's Jesus from the line of Judah.
Right?
You know.
So what is the wicked thing that he's doing? Is it the physical act of him spilling his seed on the ground or is it what that means?
Disobedience.
Yes, he's purposely evading his duty, the command that is given to him. He's purposely evading it. Why? Because he wants the inheritance. Now, notice he doesn't mind having the sex part though. That's okay. And repeating it over and over, who knows how many times? You know? I'm trying, Dad. I don't know. I can't get her pregnant. And the Lord sees this and it's wicked in his sight that he's lying, he's not doing his duty, he's selfish, he wants the inheritance for himself, puts him to death. The reason I bring all that up is because this is a passage that a lot of people up in our day and age and throughout the years use as a passage to say that contraception should never be used by Christians. And take it a little step further, that the only sex that God endorses is between a husband and a wife for the sole purpose of procreation. In other words, any other activity is sinful. And both of those are making way more out of this than is there. At least I think so. I mean, there's whole books on this, on the sin of Onan, and how it applies to us today, with the rise of contraception and other forms of sexual activity. As if it just cracks me up whenever as if the only thing in the realm of sex there ever was I hate to get missionary position, straight up sexual intercourse for the purpose of procreation. There was never anything else. Right? I mean, everything else is out of bounds. As if there can't be any passion. This is like, the old joke, that, how do the British have sex? Or you can, that was the old joke in the day of the Reformation, or the Revolution, but where they put they poke a hole in the sheet. I mean, all this, this is where Puritanism comes from. Anyway, I shouldn't even have brought any of that up because we got to stop, but we can get into more of that. Not next week, because next week is Holy Week. So next week around this time, we'll be at Calvary for Thursday service at noon there, and then we have service in the evening here. And those are the same services, by the way. Monday, Thursday is the same service there as it is here, so you don't have to even think about going to both, unless you want to. Good Friday's different. Good Friday's chief service, divine service at Calvary at noon, and then Tenebrae at night. I've been here 20 years. You all know the drill, so. We didn't even get into the good stuff yet. This is it's a very interesting story, full of sin and intrigue and the kind of stuff you would expect to see in the holy line of our Lord Jesus Christ. All right. Questions, comments, concerns, issues, etc. All right. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen.